What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, turns out this week we do have a Nintendo Direct to look forward to, as I kind of mentioned yesterday, with Splatoon 3 taking the spotlight, and we'll talk about some of the possibilities as to what we could see here today. Also, we are going to be talking about another game that's been delayed again, which is bringing up a lot of questions about how it's going to turn out. And we're also going to be talking about Eidos Montreal, as it looks like they're setting their sights on Cyberpunk. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today once again with Evo that happened over the weekend. There were a lot of announcements there, and I wanted to space them out a bit, but there was one in particular that has people buzzing because it looks like a new Tekken was teased during a Tekken 7 features and updates trailer, and you can see some of it here, mostly at the end of it. This was the free update and global finals announcement for Tekken 7. We have a little cinematic that plays, kind of like the old PS1 visuals, and then it quickly shifts over to more current visuals, and it says, "Get ready," which, yeah, a lot of people are looking at like, okay, this must be some sort of tease towards the next Tekken, that being Tekken 8. Some have wondered if it would be a reboot and they won't just call it like Tekken 8, but I mean, the brand awareness, the naming, all of that seems to kind of line up, I would say, with them just going with the basics there. Also, Tekken 8 was part of that NVIDIA leak list, but I don't think anyone needs to have a list get leaked out by NVIDIA to tell us that, yeah, there's going to be another Tekken at some point. Well, it came out 2015 or 2016 arcades, and it came to consoles a couple of years later. So I guess if you consider the overall release schedule, yeah, you would expect the new Tekken to happen here soon. And I'm wondering when they would reveal it, if they tease it here, maybe Gamescom or Tokyo Game Show, or the Game Awards. A lot of possibilities with some events coming up, but we'll keep an eye out for it. Also, we had a very interesting find yesterday, as a new cheat was discovered in Super Punch-Out, and I mean, it just changes this game completely. Take a look at this. This is over on Twitter from Unlisted Cheats, saying while doing some request work, casually found some new cheats in Super Punch-Out for the Super Nintendo, and they were going over this, and I realized very quickly that they've discovered how to access multiplayer in Super Punch-Out. Yeah, they say at the title, hold Y plus R, which, by the way, this is kind of weird, but you need a Joypad 2 and Joypad 1. So you need two controllers to be active here. All combinations have to be held on the second controller, and then you press A or start on the first player controller, which, yeah, it kind of explains why it would have been difficult to discover this. But at the title, you hold Y plus R, then press A or start, and following screen will appear instead, or regular menus. You can see that down there, where you can select any of the characters, fight a free single match. And to go a bit further, at the character info screen, hold B plus Y, then press A or start, again using second player and then first player. From now on, the CPU opponent will be controlled from Joypad 2, so you can fight against a real person, which makes a game that most of us remember as like a single player game multiplayer. So now I'm interested to break out my copy of Super Punch-Out with a Super Nintendo and try it out and see if this is something that works. Some people were saying in the comments that it didn't work, but then they realized you need to use second player. So I'm curious to see how this turns out here, but interesting stuff. If you have a copy, go ahead and try it out. Oh, and another announcement we had at Evo has to do with Fatal Fury. In fact, it looks like there's a new one that's been greenlit. They showed this off in a trailer on stage that got everyone in the crowd really, really excited, as it looks like the new Fatal Fury, a Garo Mark of the Wolves game, being greenlit, now in development. It's been more than 20 years. And I will say Garo Mark of the Wolves has been moved to current platforms. Like, it's on PlayStation, Xbox, Switch. I think it even got moved to the Vita. So there are people who are a bit more familiar with this series now than if it had been left on like the Dreamcast and with the PS2 and stuff. I actually remember it from the Dreamcast. I'm not like the biggest fighting game fan or anything, but this is one in particular that I remember, and it was pretty technical overall. But I'm curious to see what art style they go with, how it's going to look now more than 2 decades later, so something to keep an eye on here, but it said it got greenlit pretty recently, and based on the trailer they showed, it's probably going to be a little while before we see gameplay. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get to the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Nintendo Direct that has now been announced for this week. We can see this over on Twitter from Nintendo of America. Tune in on August 10th at 6 a.m. Pacific for a live-streamed Splatoon 3 Direct presentation. Join us in the Splatlands for roughly 30 minutes of updates. That's quite a long Direct for just being focused on one game, but if you think about with Splatoon 3, they should have quite a bit to show us. I've seen people mention what's going on with Splatoon 3. They haven't said a lot, but I mean, they were trying to do a good marketing push for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. That's now out, and obviously the next thing up would be Splatoon 3 next month. So now is the time for them to really get loud about this game, and 30 minutes should be plenty of time to talk about the multiplayer, which is something that people have brought up as looking very similar to Splatoon 2, and yeah, it's not going to be drastically different when it comes to the multiplayer side, as there is an entire competitive scene around it, and the game series has sold well for being a new intellectual property that Nintendo created and revealed during the Wii U era, and with Splatoon 2 really exploded there when it came to the sales and active users and all of this. So I feel like they'll just be introducing some different elements into the multiplayer while trying to keep it really the core experience. I think the place that they can get a bit more off the rails would be the single player, and I think that's one of the reasons this is a 30-minute presentation. They will show some stuff for multiplayer, but I kind of believe the single player is the big thing that they've kind of kept under wraps, and they'll be showing off here quite extensively. I mean, if you remember when it was first revealed, they showed you kind of making a character and then wandering through sort of this like this open area that looked pretty desolate. Then you got like on a bus and drove to the city and everything. So I kind of wonder if there is a bit more to that aspect that we just haven't seen yet. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for, is a more robust single player while still keeping the core multiplayer aspect in line with some different tweaks and additions there. So a lot to go over, 30 minutes worth, so keep an eye out for this one tomorrow. Next up, let's talk about a big game delay for 2022, which seems to be the recurring theme for this year. Games just getting pushed into 2023. We can see this posted up over on Twitter. This is from the Midnight Suns account, saying, after discussion with the team, we've made the decision to move back the launch timing of Marvel's Midnight Suns to ensure we are delivering the best possible experience for our fans. We will launch later this fiscal year on Windows PC, Xbox Series X, S, and PlayStation 5, with the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and Nintendo Switch versions following at a later date. We know fans are looking forward to playing Marvel's Midnight Suns, and we will use this extra time to make sure we are delivering the best possible experience for everyone. It's obviously a little weird because I have like this staggered release for last-gen systems of the PS4, the Xbox One, the Switch, I guess kind of being lumped in with that, and then the PS5 and the Xbox Series with PC coming first. But we don't have release dates for any of this stuff now, and it was supposed to come out, the first week of October. Now just sometime this fiscal year, which means it would be releasing before the end of March 2023. And you know what? That's where I'm going to place this game. I think it's coming out in March 2023. And a lot of questions around this game. This is the second delay for it. And there's been some reactions to the gameplay itself. Remember when they were first showing it off? People got pretty excited at the idea of, wow, this is Firaxis. It could be like XCOM mixed with Marvel characters. And then they showed the battle system and it's like, why are there cards on this? Okay, it's a card game. Great. And there's been pushback around that design. I almost wonder if even internally they've been doing testing, focus groups, see how the games are doing internally. And it hasn't been doing as well as they would have liked with the feedback. Could they be altering it so it's less reliant and really appear less like a card game and more like an XCOM game? It's something I've seen brought up online already with a lot of reactions to this delay. And while I think it's possible, my only thing is it seems like this game has really been designed around the idea of it having this card system intertwined with it. And it feels like it'd be something that'd be really tough to completely redesign from the ground up, right? But I guess it's possible if they're concerned that that would hamper the overall experience for most people. We haven't even played the game yet, so it's tough to tell. My only concern with the card-based system is it seems like an easy avenue for microtransactions, even though they've said that microtransactions in the game wouldn't really affect any of the cards that would in turn affect the gameplay. It seems like it'd be more cosmetic stuff if they did all that. It still brings up the question that, I mean, they could, right? So again, a lot of things to wonder about this game. And at this point, we just need to wonder, when is it even going to come out? Again, I'm thinking March 2023, but let me know your best guess. Next up, let's talk about Eidos Montreal and how they're setting their sights on Cyberpunk with Deus Ex. And this is according to Jeff Grubb over on Twitch and the Giant Bomb channel, where he talked about Eidos Montreal pitching the idea of doing what Cyberpunk 2077 couldn't, with Deus Ex making a comeback. And I think that'd be kind of interesting to see how they would go about that, because yeah, I could see Deus Ex kind of lining up with what Cyberpunk 2077 was attempting to do. And Cyberpunk's gotten better with updates, but when it came out, obviously it was a buggy, glitchy mess, and the city didn't feel like it was as living as was being hyped up at the time by CD Projekt. However, according to Jason Schreier, right now Eidos Montreal, this is over on Reset Era, is game furthest in development is a new intellectual property. If they release a new Deus Ex, it won't be for a very, very long time. So, hey, I'm curious to see what their new intellectual property is. Clearly, it's something they had started working on under Square Enix, and I'm curious if Embracer Group comes in and they want to fund it further, or something they want to get out the door, and then they can get to Deus Ex as quickly as possible since it's a known entity. And, you know, the thing I want to keep an eye on here with Eidos Montreal and Crystal Dynamics, definitely Crystal Dynamics, because it seems like they are doing something that's kind of in their wheelhouse right now with Perfect Dark after those Tomb Raider games, is you feel like there'd be a bit of a chip on their shoulder, right? I mean, Square Enix, as Eidos Montreal founder kind of described it as, sold them off in a yard sale or in a garage sale, right? Like, they set them out and they were like, hey, these intellectual properties are for sale with like Tomb Raider and Deus Ex, but you gotta take these studios too, right? And in some capacity, it almost feels like having to take them was a negotiating bargaining chip for Embracer to lower the price of the whole thing to $300 million. It's a very low price. And you figure if you work at the studios, it's not necessarily, I guess it could be insulting, but you'd feel like you'd be kind of in a prove it mode. I know there's a lot of employees that work, like over 1,000 developers would be kind of heading to Embracer Group with those different Western Square Enix studios, but you do wonder how they feel after being sold off for basically nothing. I mean, now we're getting reports from Windows Central and Jez Corden that Perfect Dark's development appears to be going very well currently, and Crystal Dynamics, again, in their wheelhouse with something like an action-adventure game with Perfect Dark. So, something to definitely keep an eye on here with Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal, because when you hear these kind of quotes coming from Jeff Grubb, who has some sources, I'm sure, within Eidos Montreal, and just talking with people, it does make you think they have that chip on their shoulder, which in turn could get us some pretty interesting games. And in our last bit of news, let's take a quick look at the UK sales charts. I was curious how things would go for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 in its second week, and also, it sounded like PlayStation 5s were coming back into stock at major retailers there in the UK, so let's take a look here at the top 10, and that indeed has Horizon Forbidden West jumping to the #1 spot, and a lot of this appears to have to do with Sony being able to stock more PlayStation 5 systems, which includes that Horizon Forbidden West PS5 bundle. And Horizon Forbidden West, by the way, has been, I would say, quietly selling since it released earlier this year, and I feel like Sony's been pretty happy to talk about the official sales numbers for it when this current fiscal year ends. They could show up with a number of like 10 million or something in terms of sales for Horizon Forbidden West. Then Nintendo Switch Sports sitting there at #2. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga at 3. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, again, why not, at 4. Gran Turismo 7, that jumped up pretty heavily there. Again, More PS5s come in stock. PS5 games tend to sell. And then Minecraft there at 6, F1 22 at 7. Then Pokemon Legends Arceus jumped back up in the top 10, at that one being at 8. Animal Crossing New Horizons. Then Xenoblade Chronicles 3 did fall from 1 all the way to 10. And according to GamesIndustry.biz, sales were down 83% week on week. These are all physical over-the-counter sales, though, so keep that one in mind. I do believe we're seeing more and more of a split towards just digital in general, like across the board. But yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 falling that far, I mean, not great. I'm more curious how the overall legs are on this game for the rest of this year, as I'm kind of looking at Xenoblade Chronicles 3, at least I was, as like this big jumping off point for the Xenoblade series, but it comes out with initial sales in Japan. It beats Xenoblade Chronicles 2 20% or so. I just thought it would have been a bit more because of the install size of the Switch, but it's pretty clear they are getting more and more fans on board with the Xenoblade series, and I do think Xenoblade Chronicles 3 will be the best-selling game in the series there. We'll just have to wait for official numbers from Nintendo, which will probably be reported sometime in like the first half of November. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. We're asked, will Nintendo hold a general direct in September? 55% say yes. Look at this, 45% say no. I mean, this whole year has already been thrown out the window in terms of like general schedules we would expect with there being no E3, right? So Nintendo, you figure they'd want to do something in September to work to fill out the first quarter or even first half of 2023. But I'm looking at their holiday right now, and I'm like, do they need a general direct? Could they get by with a couple of Twitter reveals? Like, we've heard about this Metroid Prime remaster remake so much, right? Like, Jeff Grubb is positive it's coming out this year. That could just be something they reveal in a Twitter drop, and they don't have to worry about, oh yeah, the elephant in the room, what's going on with Metroid Prime 4, because they're not ready to talk about that, but then they also want to talk about the series with Prime Remaster. Yeah, a little strange. So I'm not sure. I'm 50-50 on a September general 30 or 40 minute direct, but I guess we'll find out in 3 or 4 weeks here. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Infinity Master saying, hey Spawn, I would appreciate it if you could inform the viewers about the Metacritic review scores for Digimon Survive, which got a solid 80 from reviewers on Metacritic. In fact, I've been enjoying the game so much that I missed Newswave for a whole week and had to binge watch all those videos today after I finished my playthrough of Digimon Survive yesterday. Let's pop on over here to Metacritic for Digimon Survive. Sitting at an 81, with 9 critic reviews. Hey, look at that though. The user score jumped all the way up to a 7.9. This thing got like review bombed into the ground at like a 0.2 on the Switch, so it's moved up pretty well there. Some of the highlights here: digitally downloaded at a 90, CG Magazine at a 90. Let's see, the lower score would be we got this covered at 70, but at its current split of 8 positive, 1 mixed, that's not too bad. It's definitely a departure for the Digimon series, and not really what a lot of people were necessarily expecting who weren't following it heavily or much at all, as it ended up being more a visual novel than anything else. I mean, when they first showed it and talked about it, it did seem like it was going to be a strategy, tactical-based RPG, and then it became heavily story-driven as like a visual novel. But hey, people seem to be enjoying it. I'm curious what's next for the Digimon series. Is this the new direction for it, and they just build on top of it, or do they have other plans going forward? One thing's for sure, though, Bandai Namco, you gotta work on your marketing for the Digimon franchise. I feel like Digimon should be much more popular in the gaming space than it is now. I mean, at one point, it was right next to Pokemon as being comparable. It had some really cool moments with the anime back in the day, and it just seems like Bandai Namco didn't really care that it was coming out. There's no review copies sent out. I barely saw any kind of like marketing, whether it's on websites or on YouTube. So Bandai Namco, you gotta straighten up with this one a bit next time. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Splatoon 3 Direct tomorrow? What do you hope to see there? And then Marvel's Midnight Suns delayed again. What do you think is going on with this title? And then Eidos Montreal bringing back Deus Ex to take on Cyberpunk. Is that something you'd like to see? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.